There's been, as you know, worldwide, there's a huge hunger for yield.
So Gene, welcome back to the studios.
Thank you for having me again.
You're very welcome. So starting off, there were some recent high-profile failures of some top Russian banks. Now, what does this mean for the banking system and the two major players in the Russian banking sector?
Well, the problems have begun a while ago, obviously. The Russian banks have been accumulating bad debt. I would say the two players that have been relatively exempt from I would say the visible problems would be Sberbank and VTB. So the central bank has been on the cleaning spree for the last several years, revoking licenses every week or so has been in the news. But most of these banks have been relatively small and probably, at most like medium size. So failure of banks from top 10, I don't think that was part of the original plan. However, the more recent ones were from Bank Открытие, and Binbank. Those were two banks from top 10, both privately owned. What that exposed is that even at that level, the banks were really not operating in a traditional way. They were basically glorified hedge funds, acting for the benefit of their shareholders. So I believe that exposed like an intrinsic flaw that a lot of insiders always knew and suspected. The rest of the analysts have never really had any hard evidence to that effect. So what does it mean for the two largest players, Sberbank and VTB? Sberbank is fairly safe because it's enjoying deposits from most of has a huge market share of retail deposits. VTB, on the other hand, has been kind of like a government's piggy bank for various projects, both foreign and domestic. It's been throwing its weight behind all kinds of projects as far away as Mozambique. Recently there was a default in Mozambique. There was like a restructuring. It's active in restructuring of debt with Venezuela. So whatever the Russian government decides to venture, like I said, both foreign and domestic, VTB is there. This cannot be healthy for the bank in the long term. So I believe that, and we've seen that, and VTB suffered a huge price drop just in the last few weeks. I think most analysts are beginning to realize that not all government banks are created equal, and some are about to experience problems, I would say. They all have problems, but some will experience them sooner than the others. And I think VTB is the next one we're going to see like in the negative light. They're going to see some bad news coming.
And Ukrainian bonds have been going through some turmoil, to say the least, from near default to price highs. Is there any value left?
Well, I would say the situation in Ukraine is almost the flip side of what it's like in Russia. Russia's been very much in favor among the investors in the last year or two. Across all asset classes, it's seen as cheap and looks like it's got its act together both economically and politically, where the Ukraine is almost the flip side of that. However, we've seen it looks like some of the prices have reached bottom. And two of its major players, like kind of the flagship bonds, DTEK, which is energy distribution company in eastern Ukraine, owned by Akhmetov, like a Ukrainian oligarch, and Privatbank, which is a privately owned bank, the largest privately owned bank, recently been essentially failed and nationalized by the government. Both of those bonds have rebounded from what essentially are default levels to something that's, well, I would say we're not excluding default judging on pricing, but the prices have gone up very, very significantly, more than 30% in each case. So it looks like prices have hit bottom, and we feel that there is a substantial value still there. And it also seems that some of the other corporates may follow. So the mood is more optimistic, I would say, than even as recently as 6 months ago.
Fantastic. And now finally moving over to Eastern Europe. So Eastern Europe bonds have been at higher highs. Now, is it fair to compare Eastern European bonds such as Romanian bonds, Bulgarian bonds and Baltic state bonds at a similar price point to those of Italy and Spain?
Well, there's been, as you know, worldwide, there's a huge hunger for yield. The rates are so low across the world especially in the Eurozone. I would say the risk differentiation has become minimal. I mean, the difference between, forget about like places like Bulgaria, Romania, or Italy and Spain. I mean, they're trading almost on par with, with each other. Where, in fact, obviously, some of these countries are massively more wealthy and economically developed than others. It just shows that the risk differential that investors are willing to accept to get that extra 30, 40 basis points of yield has become, dramatic. And in some way, it really deviates a great deal from reality. I mean, reality is that, obviously, Eastern European countries, with the possible exception of Poland and Czech Republic, are not doing as well economically, or they're not as intrinsically robust as some of the older European countries. But I would say an even more dramatic comparison would be a country that's not even in the Eurozone, of say like Azerbaijan, where we have recently seen the price for its state bonds rise dramatically, trading at only a relatively small premium to major European bonds. Now that is very surprising, considering the problems with oil, with everything else it's been having. So overall, hunger for yield. Investors are willing to overlook obvious risks to get a few basis points, and that's not going to last for long.
Absolutely. Well, Jean, thank you so much for coming in today. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Well, that's all from us here in the Geneva studios, but we want to hear how you found this interview, so please do like and comment on dukascopy.tv.